Hey, how's it going, guys? So here's a couple of cool things you can do with the spectrum analysis tool. I'm using FabFilter Pro Q3 just for the spectrum analysis. So it'll tell you that anything above that line is going to represent static distortion. So that means you want to check the levels to make sure that you're not above that on your pickup height and the interface gain. And if you're using any pedals going in before that, you want to make sure that the levels are not clipping, because once you turn on the amp sim, it's just going to enhance all that negativity, all that white noise. It's just going to pump up all that white noise, and it's going to sound terrible and scratch your ears and fatigue them. It might sound okay at first, and you play guitar and it sounds saturated and it feels like a tube amp a little bit. But after 10 minutes or so, and just playing chords and stuff, it just doesn't sound right. It's very, very shrill, kind of harshness to it. So if you look at the waveform when I play a chord, you can see that it's just below the line. So that's pretty much the perfect level right there. If it's going above, then reduce the input, and if you're on 0 on the input, then reduce the height on your pickup height. So just right now, I'm about halfway there, because you want it just as hot as possible to the line without going over. That's the golden little region you want to sit in, not going above the 0 decibel line, because once you turn on the amp sim, like I said, then it's going to be super clean, and it's going to sound like a proper tube amp. Another thing that you can do with the waveform analysis or the spectrum analysis is check for white noise. And if you turn up the preamp gain on your interface, you'll notice that there's a lot of white noise once you turn it up, and that's all being enhanced. All that stuff's going in your guitar tone. So you want to reduce it to the point where it's deleted. Any sort of white noise, you got to get rid of that, and then set the level according to that. Don't set the level according to what the amp sim learn tool might tell you to do or whatever, or like what kind of, like, when you're looking at the bars on your interface or on your DAW, set it to the white noise, because that'll give you the cleanest source, because then once you turn on the amp sim, it will sound more like a real tube amp. So another thing that this is good for is when you're using guitar pedals, and you can check the knobs, because all guitar pedals generate some sort of white noise, and they have extremes that it's just how they are. They're just little kind of flaws, I guess. So for instance, if I crank the level on this Boss compressor pedal, you can see that that's just in there. That's just white noise just sitting there. And people might instinctively crank it because it sounds cool at first, but they don't realize that that's fatiguing their ears, and that's just sitting in the mix and adding mud, or just it's ruining the clarity of it. So you just find the sweet spot. You just move it up and down until you get rid of all that. So yeah, and then you find the maximum point. And once you actually start playing guitar, you just know that's going to be the extreme. That's like, don't go beyond that. You can reduce it if you need to, but don't go beyond that. And like the sustain, I went through all the knobs earlier, and these ones are fine, but once you get to the sustain, it has quite a lot of white noise as well. Like if I were to crank the level and the sustain, those two together, creating quite a lot of white noise. So you want to reduce them to the point of maximum, just so you know where it sits, and then you can play guitar. And it's funny, because that's actually where I would just normally put it at. That's where it sounds really good, but that's 0 white noise. And you don't necessarily need to apply this to an amp sim. Even if you just only use tube amps, take all your pedals and go through them and do this process. Plug it in with a guitar and load up a spectrum analysis tool, and then just go through all your pedals and just see, like, just turn the knobs and just see like which ones generate white noise, because that's sitting in your guitar tone, and that's adding filth and harshness. You want to get rid of all sort of white noise. There might be grounding issues. That's another thing that this can detect or inform you of. If there's any sort of grounding issues with your pickups or with the pedals that you're using. So it's a very handy tool. So yeah, that's basically it. Just it tells you where to set the level, and it tells you, like, don't go above the line, and it also tells you if there's any white noise going on with your preamp gain and in guitar pedals. So yeah, that's everything. Have a good day. Cheers.